What is happening, super fans? You're listening to Behind the Mask, the show where we chat with your favorite superhero fiction authors about the worlds and the heroes that they are writing. Behind the Mask is brought to you by the excellent folks over at superherofiction.com. I'm your host, Franklin Kendrick, and today on the show, I am pleased to be chatting with author C.T. Phipps. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how are you doing? Glad to be here.
Doing good. We are glad to have you on. So, the first question for you is not really sort of a question, but tell us a little bit about your secret identity. When you're not a superhero behind the keyboard writing stories, who are you out there in the real world?
Well, I am C.T. Phipps in both real life as well as fiction. I was born in Ashland, Kentucky, and I'm still living here 39 years later. I was originally planning to teach college English, but ended up drifting to writing because of my love of science fiction and fantasy. I never thought I would actually end up writing superhero fiction, though, despite my love of the genre. However, something just got in my brain, and I had the image of a funny little wizard who wanted to be a supervillain. That demanded to be written, and ended up being my most successful series so far.
Excellent. I love the wizardry image mixed with like superhero because it's like I imagine like a crazy sorcerer that's just like, yep, well, this is happening.
Yeah, I actually described the guy as wearing a Halloween costume reminiscent of a Sith Lord, and he just like totally uses the imagery as much as he can there. At one point, he has a Slytherin scarf before his henchwoman rips it off him.
Love it. Oh,
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah.
So I can tell this is going to be an exciting world to chat about.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
so, what got you into writing in the first place? And then specifically, I know you, looking at your bibliography, you've written in a couple different genres. What got you to work in the superhero genre?
I always wanted to be a writer since I understood the concept, like 4 or 5 years old there. However, I wasn't any good until about college, and I had to really put my nose to the grindstone from there to get anything written whatsoever, because there's a million writers, but only about one or two of them ever actually put anything to the page. And there's another old saying that the first million words those people write are crap, and you need to get past them in order to get anything anyone wants to read. I was lucky enough to be mentored by such excellent writers as David Neal Wilson, author of Hoods and the Dove Ninja Chance series, Jim Bernheimer, who wrote the excellent Confessions of a D-List Supervillain, and a few
Nice.
other authors who showed me the ropes there. Superheroes is where pretty much everyone who actually has heard of me knows me from, because of the Supervillainy saga, because that sells out everything else I've written combined. But I occasionally dabble in science fiction, urban fantasy, and even one straight fantasy series.
I feel like it's such a thing. Like everybody that I know, I feel like we've all tried a fantasy series at one point in our lives, just because it's like that's what got us for novels. That's what like hooked us. But my goodness, they're like so hard to write. I feel like compared to the superhero genre, and they're just such a tough sell because it's like if you're not an established person, it's like there's too much like word of mouth in that genre where it's like, oh my gosh, this superhero fiction is competitive, but my goodness, the fantasy genre is like, holy moly.
Well, the good thing about the superhero genre is it's still a very large pool you're jumping into there, but it's one not quite as road well traveled, at least in the literature format. So you can, if you're not got to get on the ground floor, at least floor 15 of the 200 mile sky.
Goodness, yeah, I'm happy that it's getting attention. I'm happy that people are finally over the myth that like superheroes only belong in like comic books and like visual medium, because I mean
Mm-hmm.
there's so much to tell. There's so many things that like you said when at the beginning, like the amount of writers who actually don't put their stuff down on the page is like it's going to be crazy. So like I'm just so glad that people are giving the genre a shot and like discovering it and being like this, it works. It's not just the comic books.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. I remember my first superhero lit book was Soon I Will Be Invincible, which I still recommend to anyone who wants to figure out how do I write something about superheroes that's hilarious and add something to just the way we think about the genre.
That one is excellent. I feel like I read that like I feel like that was also one of my like early on because up before, not to take it on like a crazy tangent, but I remember the very first stuff that I saw was like it's novelizations of a movie or of a comic series where it's like it's weird because I mean, wouldn't it be the best as a comic series? So it's like it's like, oh my gosh, other people besides, you know, Superman writers write write epic superhero stuff.
Oh yes, I mean, we could be all here with my interview, just me listing my favorite superhero series. There are some mainstream ones or mainstream-ish. There, George R. R. Martin created the Wild Card series,
Mhm.
and there's also the many dozens of indie superhero literature stories that I absolutely love, ranging from Wearing the Cape, Don't Tell My Parents, I'm a Supervillain, and I especially like Darius Brasher's superhero world, where he's written like 4 or 5 series that all tie together in one world, kind of like he's writing individual comic book series.
Mhm. Oh yes, it's like there's plenty to be inspired by for the genre. Steering it to your series, the Supervillainy Saga.
Hmm.
Can you give us like sort of an overview? And I know I believe it's 5 books. Maybe I might be off.
6
But
now, and I'm hopefully
six
going to get
books.
2 more released simultaneously or close to it there. So it's hope I have plans for at least 12 books in the series as a total, which is pretty ambitious, but people still are reading it. So hey.
Why not? So give us like a tour of what the series is all about.
Okay. The Supervillainy Saga is about the adventures of Gary Karkovsky and his kooky crew of henchpeople. Gary was an ordinary schlub who got fired from his job as a bank teller when he discovers a magic cloak pretty much delivered right to his doorstep, and it turns out to have belonged to the superhero known as the Nightwalker. Deciding that with great power comes great irresponsibility, he immediately lands himself in incredible trouble. But it turns out he's not quite evil enough to be the villain he thought he could be there, and being a supervillain isn't just robbing banks and making witty comebacks.
It's always more complicated than it seems on the surface.
Oh yes. The books start with him trying out to be a supervillain, getting crashing into the other supervillains of the city who don't like the competition and resent the fact he's walking around wearing more or less the costume of the hero that just died. And from there, it just gets crazier and crazier. Some people love to keep their superhero series grounded or more Dark Knight than Justice League, and I'm like, no, I want to have a superhero world that started in the 1930s with the Justice League, Justice Society punching Nazis, and then moved on to time travel, aliens, and everything in between.
Oh my gosh,
Oh yeah.
it's like the ceiling is limitless for what you want to do, basically.
Oh yes. Yes, Gary lives in a world where there's dozens of fictional cities with their own superhero teams and so on there, and every issue he runs into another. This isn't quite the character you know from the comics, but it's similar enough that you're getting the joke. Uh,
So for supervillainy, what is like the range of? Because you mentioned that he's not the supervillain that he thought he was when he encounters the like crazy supervillains. How outrageous is the villainy? Like, what is like the craziest act of villainy in your universe that somebody would do?
well, the story starts there with Gary just doing his attempted bank robbery, and I think the first chapter can summarize the character's emotional journey fine. When he's just standing on top of the place he used to work and thinking, "I'm going to rob this place there, get all the money," and then another group of supervillains, led by the Ice Cream Man, arrives with his evil group of Neapolitan henchmen. He ends up stopping them, and just as they're all thanking him for saving their lives, he makes off with a couple of bags of cash.
Oh my gosh, I love the names. I love it. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
it instantly the thing that I love about naming superheroes and villains is the really like the zany ones that you think, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Like the minute that you read it or hear it, it's like my brain just conjures them up. It's like instantaneous.
Oh yes. The thing about Gary is when he's trying to come up with a name there, he decides to come up with Merciless, which is okay, pretty standard super villain name, except of course, it doesn't actually apply to his personality whatsoever. And he doesn't just stop there. He goes like, "I'm Merciless, the super villain without mercy," trademark.
Oh my gosh. So like
Yeah.
so for well, this sort of like segues into my next question for you, which is if your main character is considering themselves a villain, are there heroes that go up against them in like a traditional sense? Or is it just like everyone's a villain and there's like just different levels of how amazing of a villain you are?
Well, the big thing about Gary has to face, he has a very skewed view of supervillains versus superheroes. We find out Gary had a pre-cloak history with the superhuman world. His brother was a crook during the 90s called Stingray, the underwater assassin, basically a discount Black Manta. And Gary thought of him as a Robin Hood-esque folk hero when he was just a regular, ordinary crook. However, because this was the 90s, poor Gary witnesses his brother getting gunned down by Shoot 'em Up, who is even more of a discount Punisher. This this leaves him thinking that superheroes are bad anti-heroes who are just keeping down the little guy there, and increasingly he just finds out that both of them were very different from the average norm there, and he ends up fighting serial killers, Nazis, demons, and just complete sociopathic mad scientists, and then even while he's trying to be a thief, he ends up getting considered to be the folk hero that he always thought his brother was by his hometown. And he's like, no, no, I am a villain. Yeah. I mean, there's at one point during the first book, and this is not a spoiler, he's thinking back about how he used to date this girl with glasses that his wife just points out, you do realize that was Ultra Goddess, right? and, and then and then effectively he not so many words, one to say, you realize you're just Catwoman, right? You're the villain that the heroine flirts with, and isn't bad enough to actually be a main time attack.
Oh jeez. It's like a zany like tone I would imagine for
Oh yes.
all of their situations
Ultra
they get
Goddess
in.
is effectively a Supergirl. Ultra God is a African American superhero from the 1930s who fought racism and Nazis and so on, and is the paragon of what's one. And his daughter's the guy that Gary used to date. And of course, when he finds this out, it's like, oh wow, if I've set myself as an arch nemesis, I've aimed way too high.
Yeah, you know from personal experience that you are no match for who this is.
Yeah,
Oh,
another point from the books. At one point, Gary has just managed to defeat a group of 90s anti-heroes and is like, "Oh god, I've seriously injured and maybe killed some of these psychopaths there, but that means I'm now going to be on the number one list of supervillains that are going to get taken down because you don't kill a superhero as part of one of the rules of supervillainy. You just leave them in death traps or increasingly hard to escape situations because the cutie comes down, and then 5 seconds later, Ultra God comes down, grabs him, and flies off. I'm like, this is not how the comics work.
so in your universe, like is it's appropriate to just be like, okay, well, as long as the trap does the killing, then it's fair game.
Well, the general rules are explained to Gary by one of the henchmen he picks up while trying to figure out how to become a supervillain. He finds this washed up, suffering severe permanent injuries from the numerous beatings he's taken over the years, and how his super chemical has caused internal damage that he's like paying the medical bills off there, called Diablo Man. Yeah, and he used to be an A-list villain that's now reduced to working for like the equivalent of Clue Master. and and Gary is like, "Oh man, I am such a huge fan of you." And like after Gary just knocks off his boss there, the guy's like, "Okay, well, I guess you're the boss now." And just starts giving him all these the titular rules and what the things are to make it big. And one of the rules is, well, you can try and kill super heroes there, but unless you're fully intending to be one of those psychopaths who are killing your arch nemesis forever, don't ever permanently kill them there, because then all the other superheroes are obligated to take you in. And in contrast to what comics there, it's very likely you won't be taken in alive. You'll have some building pieces fall down on you. Your goblin glider will accidentally impale you, or oh dear, you dropped down that fire from the top of you fell out of my hands while I was flying. Dear.
Oh no.
Because as Gary finds out there, the superhero no killing rule is something they very strongly publicly attached to there, but doesn't apply to super killers.
Okay. It's like, how well can you hide if you actually want to do this,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
So the world,
there are people that are just definitely haven't been able to pull it off in their entire careers there as well. But Gary also meets while being imprisoned in at least in one part of the books at a super prison. There's the arch villains who are literally smart enough to take over the world, and is like, well, is it really megalomania if you can do it?
it's like it's not much of a challenge at that point.
Yes, and then he meets the professional criminals who just have the gimmicks, and they're like, we're just trying to make money here, man. You know, we get our legal fees paid by fans.
And they would be able to have like a Patreon somewhere, and it'd be like, yep.
Yes, it's like there's like five Mr. Chillingsworths there. They all have ice rays. I mean, how can you prove that it was which I was the one that robbed that place? And
yeah,
then there's also
how do you copyright your name in real life?
straight out psychopaths, and Gary gets stuck in with as roommates with the equivalent of Bullseye, the psycho slinger. And he's like, I killed the entire population of Oakland. It's like, is that a metaphor? Are you talking about their football team? No, I killed every last person in Oakland.
It's like, good luck. Good sleep with
one
eye open.
Help me out of here.
Oh my goodness. So for the world of your heroes, can you tell us I mean, the public must be like used to seeing routine clashes, I would imagine.
Oh yes. It's a world with a couple of thousands of superheroes, and probably twice as many 10 times as many supervillains there, because it turns out people are just no damn good. And even if they think they're heroes, they're often bad guys. And it adds to the sense of history and the craziness. And this is a wacky world. And I believe that just helps make the humor of poor Gary unwittingly becoming the straight man to all of this even more fun.
Is it so? Do you keep a like spreadsheet of info that you got to remember for having like a bunch of characters and like world details?
I definitely try, and whenever I introduce a character, even as an aside there, I write them down as a list there so I don't forget who they occupy as the role of. There's the Society of Superheroes, which is the moon-based collection of all the greatest heroes in the world, and I have analogs, but I never have direct combinations. The Nightwalker, for example, the guy that poor Gary has stolen the cloak of, at least unwittingly, was the equivalent of Batman and Doctor Strange. He was the world's greatest sorcerer and protector of the universe, but also dealt with street crime in Falcon Crest City, which is half Gotham, half Arkham, Massachusetts. Yeah, and I mentioned Ultra God, who is the Paragon, the Superman equivalent there, but he actually is a light manipulator rather than a just indestructible flying brick. So he's more Green Lantern, and just mixing it up just a little bit there. I have Guinevere, who is King Arthur's heir, and she does have all the Wonder Woman set there, but Celtic.
Nice. That sounds interesting. I like that twist.
You need the people occupying the archetypes if you're going to do the this is a crazy superhero-esque world, but you don't have to go directly one for one.
So do the heroes and the villains, do they ever do like a convention to discuss like what's going on in the latest developments in their sections of the world?
Yeah, I think that said something with that they're based on the moon there, and there's this actual like big, huge Kirby city there that they're living with all the support staff you need to run an international paramilitary organization of super beings. And I'm like, and Gary's just going like there, and he's like, "You guys live here?" It's like, sometimes it's just easier than maintaining a secret identity, and Gary becomes all judgmental, and then they're like, "Yeah, Gary, we're the people who are doing the weird thing here," rather than.
So for Gary, how much like how big of a shock is it going from like, all right, you found the cloak, he makes up his identity, and then like figuring out like, oh, this is like the grand scope. Is it well known like how elaborate the world gets once you have like a secret identity?
I think the issue with Gary is he has a very specific idea about what being a supervillain and superhero is like, from living tangentially close to it from for most of his life there. But his biases have kept him from really figuring out how it happens. But it's a world where superheroism is an established part of the world. It's if you got superpowers and decided I'm going to fight crime, that is not a weird decision as far as the public knows there, or even like if you use your powers to become a bad person. It's a thing that people do and have jobs from, and various laws and so on. And the public is, of course, ridiculously jaded right up until things do get deeply traumatizing. Like at one point, the zombie apocalypse that gets set upon the hometown. I'm like, well, this is a national disaster. We have the president declaring a state of emergency. We've ordered off the city with the military, calling in the superheroes. And Gary's like, okay, that's not good. I mean, there's only been like 5 or 10 worldwide crises in the world, but they're parts of the world that everyone remembers rather than just getting ignored next week.
Yeah, those are like the I remember back when this happened. You kids weren't born yet.
Yeah, Gary, all the pop culture in our world is the same, which is a joke by one of the a universe-altering villain. He says, like, "Yes, I've been to worlds where there are no superheroes, but strangely, they still have Back to the Future." Yeah, and something like that. I'm The real thing with this world is I love throwing in noodle incidents too. That history has just gone very differently here due to the presence of superheroes. And while it's close enough that you recognize this world, it also does, I think, add a real sense of authority, because it being the same world as our own would not be the case.
Mm-hmm.
I think Watchmen was the one that really introduced the idea. There's like, wow, history has just gone down a very different path. So I throw in things like, yeah, my dad was a veteran of Vietnam too.
Oh, jeez.
Or yeah, remember when Ultra God killed Hitler, and Stalin joined forces with General X?
Oh my gosh. So I have a question about that, about the world building, like history aspect of it. Because I don't know if I've asked. I might have asked other people I've talked to on the show in the past that have written like alternate history or like alternate whatever you want to call it. But how do you just pick and choose what you want to alter? Like, do you have like specific real events in history that you want to do a twist on? Like, how do you come up with what you want to change? And then, like, I mean, I guess I just have such a hard time wrapping my head around. Like, I've always toyed with, that'd be fun to do like an alternate history. But then when it comes down to it, I feel like my brain just doesn't want to think ahead to be like, what do I want the repercussions to be, and what would actually need to take place?
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing about Gary's world is I try and keep the general shape of history to be roughly the same there, because if you're going to go change the dominoes completely, it's not going to be the world that reminds people of their comic book world. There, you can have the foundation for world harmony fighting Phantom, the evil organization out to rule the world during the 80s with their colorful GI Joe-esque teams, but you don't want to have say the Gulf War did not happen, because that's a thing that just goes domino wise there. It's like, then how is this world anything similar to it? Because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I had World War II not happen, then that's going to have a very different effect on, say, Gary, because he's Jewish, and
Okay.
yeah, and so is his chief henchwoman, Cindy. They actually were a boyfriend and girlfriend in high school, which is part of the general humor that his wife takes from. He's like, why does everyone these old friends of yours turn out to be incredibly hot women?
Because I don't know. It just happens to me.
It's just a thing. It's the super gene, man. It works for the men too.
uh, uh, so good. It's like, because you would if it was real life. Like you would totally, even if you weren't trying to exploit it. I feel like it would just happen to you. It's like, oh boy.
I think they mention that for photo shoots, the Society of Superhero employs extensive CGI and illusions, just to make sure, because being the beautiful elite is just part of their marketing gimmick.
It's just gonna be.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is like, my next question is about inspiration. I mean, you must have like tons of inspiration that you've drawn on to create the world and your superheroes and supervillains.
Oh yes, I mean I grew up one of the crazy obsessive spider kids, and I used to take all the little plastic bags with all my comics, and I actually put duct tape on the back, and I wallpapered my room with it, so it looked like the wall of a comic book store, and it was incredible there with my little Spidey sheets. But eventually I got to high school, and there I switched around, and but I have an all-consuming love of superheroes, and whenever I'm writing, it's just an excuse to just surround myself in the media there. It's like I'm going to watch the 90s Spider-Man cartoon in the background while I'm typing away.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like and I mentioned this in other episodes, but I mean, like how crazy to be in like our current like world where we have so many things that even just like 10 years ago, you would never be able to access these stories in whatever medium it was because nothing was like digitized. But now, even like, I could watch old Superman animation from like the beginning of the animation days, and it's like not a big deal. Like, we have access to so many things that otherwise, like, when I was younger, it was like if it's not on DVD or a random VHS tape, like you'll never see it again.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Oh yeah. One of the things that Stephen King wrote in On Writing, which was when I first decided to become a writer, I was like, okay, who do I turn to tell me how to do it there? I just like picked his book out of it, and it was an amazing book there. I really recommend it. He said, whatever you write is going to be like milk in the fridge. It'll taste like what it's next to, which was Stephen King's way of saying that whenever he runs to write a specific kind of book, like for The Dark Tower, he watched a lot of old Clint Eastwood movies and reread some of his own pieces. So it became that dark fantasy kind of Western. And he said he also doing it for science fiction. And he encouraged writers, rather than what many people do the opposite of, is like, I need to keep my brain away from all other things that are like that, so it'll be completely different. He says like, no. You want to write science fiction, watch a bunch of Star Trek. It'll keep your brain in the zone.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll even if you're trying to write differently, you'll be fresh and aware that what's there that you want to do differently. And I feel the same way with superheroes there. In my case, I just deluge myself in the MCU and my favorite cartoons and reading the comics on Kindle. And they're like, okay, now I can know exactly what I want to write because I'm writing about what I love and I'm surrounded by it. And I'm like Gary. This is my world.
Mm-hmm. So would for well, I guess it would be comics and and the animations and stuff. Would you say did you watch a lot of like Adam West Batman for some of the zany like humor situations?
Well, Gary is grounded enough there, and the horrific consequences sometimes are happening about his world there. Because when Gary drops the Batmobile equivalent on a bunch of goons, they're dead.
It's like
So
what the stakes are.
yes, so it's not quite that level there. I'd say something around slightly kookier. Dr. Horrible meets the Dresden Files was how I described it to
Okay.
Lisa Friend. Yes. Yes. The Adam West universe of the 60s, though, that is canon to my world there, because at one point he meets the 70-year-old Burt Ward figure, Sunlight, who was the Nightwalker's sidekick. And he's like, oh, God, I thought you were made up by the show. And he's
It's like
like,
one of those
no, I
situations.
was in fact actually his trusty partner. It's like, do you have any powers? And he's like, I have a gun.
Yep. It's like one of those moments where you're talking to friends and then you mention an actor and something they've done recently and they go, wait, that person is still alive? I thought for sure
Oh
they had
yeah.
died like 5 years ago. It's like, no, that
Oh yeah.
person is still
No,
alive and they're
yeah,
still making stuff.
yeah, yeah. And I did actually have fun creating some bizarrely eclectic kind of villains. That the joke being that they may have really stupid gimmicks, but they're still killers and murderers and very dangerous people, like the typewriter. He has a mask that looks like an actual typewriter around his face, and I'm like, Gary's like, how do you even see through that thing?
This is like the kind of villains where you're horrified by what they did, but then they say their one liner and you're like, oh yeah, that guy.
Oh yeah. At one point,
Goodness.
Gary is wondering, is like, oh God, I keep killing people. I'm going to jail for so many years. It's like, and then his henchwoman Cindy, who is inspired by Gary to finally make the transition to full villain herself. She becomes Red Riding Hood. And it's like, did you just buy that at a costume shop? It's like this in the sexy section. It's like, and she pulls out a laser from her picnic basket. It's like, you would not believe what so many villains leave behind. You can buy this from the police evidence locker for like $10.
Oh, I would imagine that there's like a crazy black market for like materials where it's just
Oh
like, yeah,
yes,
this is all over the place.
yeah. The cops
Somebody
in
will
Falcon
profit.
Crest City are dirty as hell. There, it's like, how do the villains keep getting their stuff back? And I'm like, they bribe the cops.
I mean, that's an interesting loophole to like connect and wrap up because I feel like that's one of the big questions in like on this long ongoing media that we have of these superhero
uh,
stories is like, how do the villains? I mean, we know in real world why it's because they're marketable and they're not going to kill them, but like, how do
uh,
they get their crap back and how do they end up back at
oh yeah.
their lair?
I mean, there's a funny thing there. I mean, this is a wacky, wacky world there, but I actually enjoy throwing in explanations for all the little weird things that are going on in comic books that, from Gary's perspective, are completely normal, but from obviously the readers will get, okay, that makes a little sense there. Like Gary logs on to Crime Bay, which is where in the dark web where supervillain gimmicks are sold and X equipment that have been recovered by either sold by cops or copied or made in some fan's basement with a 3D printer. It's like,
Uh,
oh yeah, this the crime master has died, or he's gotten the chair, or well, that which may or may not kill him if he has electricity powers, but or whatever. And it's like, so if you want to go try and be the new one, there, here's his basic power set. We're auctioning that off.
oh my gosh, that would be so fun. I feel like even if you weren't wanting to be a villain, it'd be like you'd find somebody who's like, I just want to have that. I just want to put that on my wall. It's like bidding
Oh
war
yeah, yeah.
for whatever it is.
Crime bosses also auction off the identities of their villains. So there's like 15 different boomerangs and stiltsman and so on, because one goes down, one gets arrested, he doesn't actually escape. It's just they give the suit to the next guy, and it's actually the arch villains who have god world shaking powers that are the ones that tend to get out, because of course those are the people you can't keep prisoned.
Oh. Oh, I love it. So for the plot wise, my next question for you is it do you can do spoilers or not? It depends on what you want, but do you have a plot line? I would imagine you do, that when it came to you, you were like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great. This has to go down immediately. Or like, was there a twist that you came up with or a joke that you were like, yes, this one is like gold. This is going down right now.
It's interesting enough because originally this was going to be just a standalone book, and then I split the first book into two because I wrote it to being like a George R. R. Martin, like no one wants to read that for their comic. But yeah, so and besides, Gary's every single chapter is kind of like a separate issue of poor Gary's life. There, enough weirdness happens in 2,000 to 3,000 words that you could justify that. But when I was originally going to finish the first book, it was going to end on a happy-ish ending where Gary has come into his own and now is like, I know what it takes to be a supervillain. And then I'm like, why not inflict some horrific tragedy on him?
Your heroes have to go through something. Your villains have to go through something too.
And that's just, there's this wonderful, uplifting kind of story there, and then rug pulled Uncle Ben, Bucky, and Bruce Wayne's parents and Allie kind of thing there. And the reaction I got from my character wasn't necessarily the one that I expected, because his reaction is like, okay, I live in a crazy world. I am going to fix this. I don't care if it's time travel, the Necronomicon, making a deal with the devil with my marriage.
Oh my gosh.
Though Gary would get the better of Mephisto. And just, or some weird scientific bit of mad, crazy, kooky power. I'm going to go just not let this stand. And that actually became the focus for a number of books, because Gary's inability to deal with the repercussions of his actions becomes a providing theme of the series.
Not bad. It's like that. You would imagine that I mean, it wouldn't just be the heroes being like, yeah, let's make the world a better place. It's like, hey, these villains have to live there, even if they're not the craziest villains. So it's like they're going to make the world to their liking too. So
oh yeah, the Gary has kind of a little anarchist binge that actually has gotten me a couple of 1-star reviews. Like, you got politics in my world. It's like I'm not Gary. He's just the kind of guy who's has this kind of antagonistic, the government is out to get us kind of weird view. That would be what you'd expect from a guy who had a supervillain as a brother.
Yes, it's like the part of the writing process that a lot of readers don't think about is like, it's not just a cliche where it's like sometimes your characters just like tell you what they want to say. Like you can try to force them, but it's like it is torture when you try to feed stuff into them.
I mean, they don't even seem to sometimes. And I love my readers, and I thank everyone who has left a review, and I appreciate you taking this one. But some of them do leave like, Gary's so strange. I mean, he's so hypocritical, talking about empowering the common man and fighting the rich, and then he talks about wanting to take over the world. I'm like, yes, Gary is a hypocrite.
Yeah. As real people are. So we're distracted by shiny things.
I steal from the rich because they deserve it, and now I'm rich, then I can keep mine.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it does help that most of the people that Gary robs are kind of asking it for it there. At one point, he drives a flying pirate ship into the side of Wall Street. And then it's like, why are you trying to rob this place? There's no money here. And it's like, okay, guys, we're going to short these stocks right here. If you don't, I'm going to freeze you for the next 200 years.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, and then the Wall Street guy's like, well, I've never seen this before, but I guess that would actually work. It's like, which stocks are you shorting?
You tell me what you want. What? Wait, you're not experienced? Oh, okay.
Okay, that's the kind of satire we're dealing with. And at that point, Gary, at one point, another kind of crazy thing is one of the superheroes finds Gary kidnapping a real son of a gun who has diverted funds from rebuilding a city after a hurricane, and he's like, and then she sees who the victim is, and is like, oh no, my powers are draining. I'm losing control. You've hit me with the force field. Because it's on television, and like Gary's like, really?
No.
I think a couple other people have done that one there, but it was just like, that's how some superheroes would react. It's like, oh no, I'm down.
Yeah, it's like that person's not. They're not that weak. Come on now. There's no way.
And it's like,
people buy this?
Perfectly fine. Save me. Sorry. I'm
Yeah.
down. Oh,
Oh no, I have another
power's fading.
engagement. Oh, I have to be somewhere. Bye. Oh my gosh. So for you mentioned earlier that you plan to have 12 books.
Yeah, well, that's the current plan there. I was originally going. I wrapped up what I thought would the series would be done at 4 books there, and after the original book there, and it just keeps expanding because I have more ideas, and some of them are have led to other ideas, and we're gonna hopefully get a 12 out of there. I don't think I can go much beyond that because at some point your readers are just gonna stop buying the sequels. But
Well,
as long as they're continuing to do so, hey, no end in
yeah.
sight.
I know I've seen in the sci-fi genre there are indie authors where it's like, oh, you're on book 25 and you're still going strong. It's like I can only hope for like the appetite from the readers that goes for that amount, and then
Yeah,
hope for the energy to write that much.
yeah. I mean, I look on Amazon sometimes and see indie writers who have like, okay, this is Hero High 65, and I'm like,
Oh yeah, I have no idea. Like I guess my brain is just not set up to be
I mean, like, are these
that
like 20
quick.
pages or what's going on here, man? I mean, I don't even know how you did that unless you started in like 1999 there, man.
I always imagine this is like a tangent, but I always imagine being like having that group of writers where you're like, yeah, we're all just gonna team up. We'll have a pen name. We'll crank them out, and then we'll all just be rich. And I'm like, oh, if only it was that
Yeah.
easy, and I could just
Oh yeah.
just find that.
Oh
And they
yeah.
just fight everybody when they're like, you didn't pay me enough, and I'll be like, really?
Oh yeah. Well,
Mm.
advice there as an indie author who has managed to get to a mid-tier publisher. Sometimes I've dealt with both sides of the indie market where there's the guys who are really solid and awesome and help me do good, and there's the guys like, oh, you've been had my book for 2 years. When am I getting my first check?
Yeah, yeah. It's like rough. You got to be ready for
Let the
anything.
author beware. You got to look these people up.
Exactly. Yeah. You can't just be like, okay, somebody's interested. It's like, no, I know it feels good to be like somebody's interested, but no, look out for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Very good. Very sage advice.
Write
So,
the books you want to read, and your audience will find you. Or if it doesn't, make sure you only commit to writing a trilogy, or because you will just.
yeah, plot it out roughly for anybody that's listening that's interested in writing superhero fiction. I would say at least a rough outline of like a sentence per act of like whatever act structure you want to do, 3 acts, 4 acts. You can find them on Google. Just
Yeah.
know where you're going. That way you don't fall into the trap that I did when I started, which was I become so meandering that I was like, this is going to go nowhere. I have to chop out so much and do so much work.
Oh yeah.
But so for with more books that you have planned, uh, is there anything for? Well, first of all, do you have any hint of a release date where readers who have gotten to the end of your book so far could look forward to more? And then also, do you have sort of any hints or clues that you can say to somebody that's like, oh man, I've just finished the last book. Now it's time to like let the speculating begin.
Okay, well, hopefully I'm actually a little behind on. I try and trump out 2 Villainy Saga books a year, and this one I did not because of well, there may have been a few things that happened this year, but
Mhm.
I hope to get my next book, The Horror of Supervillainy, out by the end of December, and I'm immediately going on to the Seasons of Supervillainy for right after that, which is actually going to be a collection of stories with Gary rather than just the typical next sequel. The Horror of Supervillainy is Gary thinking he's going to be visiting his Vertigo version of his super universe and dealing with all the dark and spooky things that are deal with the blades and swamp things and so on there. But it's actually something very different. I'm not going to spoil too much on that.
sounds good. Sounds like plenty for anybody out there that is waiting patiently for more. You have plenty of go to forums, go wherever you guys go, Facebook to discuss. But uh,
Yeah. The seasons of supervillainy will have at least one novella to go with the short stories, and that will be about Gary stealing Christmas.
Oh.
Except Christmas has already been stolen by the Krampus, and now he's trying to get it back. And Gary, being Jewish, is like, "This isn't even my holiday," in the most Dante-esque voice.
Why do I care about this? Just because somebody else wants it? I don't know.
It's just, and and this is not so much a spoiler because time travel is involved there. His daughter's going like, "This is a season of presents, and you will save the world." The children of the world's material needs.
Think of the children. You, come on. Oh, goodness. Oh, I love it. It's such a like, I don't know. It's such a like breath of fresh air to see like all of the humor. I mean, there is humor, I feel like, in the genre from like people that loved Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff like that. But like, it's like your stuff sounds like it cuts like really deep to like pop culture that like, I don't know. It would be seen as like, oh, it's old fashioned, but like when you bring it into the modern day, when it's just like embraced, it's like, oh man, this stuff really was great and a riot. And like, of course you would have your character fighting Krampus.
Yeah, it's I basically just go with, I try and do some Jim Butcher, some Josh Whedon, and put them in a blender and hit for pay. And there's the Adam West influence there also, but I wouldn't. It's not as silly as, well, it's not poking fun at the genre like the Venture Brothers there, but it's a full-on celebration of the this is some damn weird stuff.
Yeah, and considering how crazy our real world is, I mean, it's not so unbelievable that it would be like, oh, I would love some crazy heroes and villains to just arise right now and like just duke it out in my front yard. Like, I'll watch. Yeah. I'll film you with my phone. Come on.
I mean, superhero insurance is apparently a thing in my world. It's the rates are incredibly hard in the downtown, leads to gentrification, terrible social ill.
So have you had, this is a question on my list, but have you, just made me think of it, have you had a character, is there anybody that just had no clue that their loved one was like a superhero or a villain who like totally is taken down, and then just be told like, okay, well, they're gone. Here's their settlement for being crushed by a building.
Oh, well, that's it's in fact actually part of the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon separation, which is part of the thing that makes Gary confused as all get out, because he keeps finding connections in his past life to the lives of superheroes and supervillains that he's like, wait, what? As mentioned, he was dating Supergirl throughout college, and he's like, what? He doesn't. That's ridiculous. She wore glasses, damn it. That whole Mystery Men kind of a reference there. And then we find out that the Ultra God family has ultra hypnosis, which is an actual Silver Age comic reference that apparently Superman was outright hypnotizing people not to recognize him as Clark Kent. Oh. I did not make this up. I just threw that in there for the most ridiculousness. And then Gary finally gets it broken. It's like, wait, you were brainwashing me the entire time we were dating?
Oh, because
this is not okay.
This is a violation of my rights.
A role model for girls. This is not cool to do to your boyfriend.
Well, depending on how stubborn they are, or I wouldn't put it past them to just use it. You can get away with it. Okay. So, for your books, they're read like in order, correct?
Yeah. Of the elements there is from 1 to 6. There you've started the rules of supervillainy and continue on there, and I haven't got any side stories yet, though I have occasionally entertained doing a spin-off. I have kind of written a little too many series off kilter anyway, and I should probably work on finishing those up first.
Yes, it's always the temptation to be like, yes, you can spin off stuff so much, and it's like, it's just made, the genre is made for the spin-offs, but like, it's sometimes you just like, even in your own world that you control, it's like, oh my gosh, the weight of just like keeping track of everything is crazy.
I read one of the superhero series I read is Marion G. Harmon's Wearing the Cape. And
Mhm.
one of my favorite characters in his books was Artemis, the vampire who doesn't actually like being a vampire, but not in the weepy way. It's just like, I find vampires stupid, but my superpowers are being a vampire, and it pisses me off. And I'm like, I love that character, and I wanted to see her and have her own entire series. And I'm just like, no, just one spinoff.
Oh, only one. Oh no. At least there's that, but oh no.
Mm.
You can only do so much, I guess, with whatever the writing schedule is. It's like you
Oh
gotta.
yes.
So before I wrap it all up, is there anything that I have not touched on that you want to put out there into the world?
No, I think that pretty much about covers it there. I just appreciate, this being a forum for talking about and mainstream superhero fiction, and I think that it's a genre that will have one who enjoys and reads one series should try and check out other ones, and be sure to leave reviews.
Definitely leave. That's one thing that we writers are always like, we're torn, like, do we ask, do we not ask? If you're a reader out there and you enjoyed the work, just leave us. You can leave stars now, I believe, on Amazon without typing, like if you're not somebody who wants to type, but like it totally helps, and it gives feedback in a way to, I mean, we all sort of have editors, whether we like hire somebody or we have our team or we self edit, but it's like just the feedback of, even if you didn't like it, like you can email us, tell us, like we want to know. I
Yeah.
want to know.
If you're gonna leave less than 3 stars, don't.
Yeah, just email us if it's really terrible. I mean,
Yes, if
obviously
it's
I've
really
heard
terrible, we don't want to hear about it.
yeah.
Whatever we say about honest feedback, no. No, we just want unadulterated praise, nothing but that.
Yes, just tell me it was amazing. Tell me you read it all in a day. You read it in an hour. It was so good.
Yeah. Yes, if you didn't like it, keep it to yourself.
Yes. But definitely, if you're a reader that's listening, don't be afraid. Like, don't be like, oh, everyone leaves reviews. Like, it really is helpful, especially in our digital world. Like, it's like the social currency where you're like, you give a like and you retweet somebody that you enjoy. Like, just give us a couple stars on the book. It's just a click, and it is helpful, I think. So we're always afraid to ask. We'll ask this time. And if you heard it, don't be afraid. We won't be mad. Just give us something. But so before I close it out, where can people find your books? And also, if you want to be found on the internet, where can people go and find you and reach out?
Well, my books are available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo. I'm a pretty variety there. Crossword Press has done me a good job of seeing me in a variety of markets, and currently, The Rules of Supervillainy is available on Kindle for 99 cents for the rest of December of 2020. So
Excellent.
now would be a good time to get started and see if it would be your bag. Uh, I also have audio and paperback versions of my books, so go ahead and pick them up. Jeffrey Kafer does an amazing job narrating the Supervillainy saga. He has a very sardonic, sarcastic voice that fits the character just perfectly. And if you want to look me up on social media, I have the Twitter of Willowhugger, due to the fact I never quite thought it would my Buffy fandom would go beyond into a full-grown author career. And I have a Facebook fan club, so just check that out under CT Phipps.
Excellent. So for the listeners out there, you know where to go. If you want to reach out, you want to listen, and audio is perfect for, you're doing chores, you're walking around, you want to hear an awesome story. You know where to go find it. Go get it. And I hope you guys enjoy. So you know what to do. I just want, before I wrap everything up, I just want to thank you for being on. And I mean, this was great. I always say I could talk forever to people. So it's lucky that I made myself a list of questions, because otherwise I'd be like, one more question. Let me one more. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
I will wrap this one up for all of you listeners out there. Whether you're listening to us on iTunes, your favorite podcasting place, or watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, give us a like, and don't miss out on future episodes. If you can comment, discuss, just leave a spoiler tag if you discuss spoilers so that we can scroll on by. And as always, just want to thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate all of you, whether you're new or old to this podcast, and I will see you guys next time.